choice cuts. Various scenes from various fanfics that I do not plan to read in full. Okay, I'm doing this quick and dirty, so no captions this time, or sound effects. Bear with me. First up, Dance of the Rainbow by Masterweaver.
People! The sound system has to be put north of the buffet table. Otherwise, the balloons will wub right into the dip.
Pinkie Pie face-huffed.
Seriously, Vinyl, do you even think these things through?
Nah, sis, I just follow the beat of my heart. The unicorn petted her turntable. I don't think Spinnis here likes the north. The way the clouds are, he just gets too much sun, you know?
Fine. Fluttershy, I know you're on lookout duty, but can you move that cloud bank just a tit to the west? I don't actually know how to.
Pinkie blinked.
You don't? But you grew up in Cloudsdale. I know, but I just never learned how to move clouds. They're just so slippery.
Pinkie Pie stared at Fluttershy for a full 10 seconds.
Oh well.
Pinkie shrugged and spun around.
I guess I can get some pony else. Hey Derpy, could you maybe?
I'm legally required to have Rainbow Dash observing me whenever I engage in weather protocol.
All right, fair enough. Hey Cloud Kicker, maybe you could.
I ain't having no part of this fiasco.
Blossomforth, why don't you?
Blossomforth shot up and eagerly dashed out of the patio, but she gave a small squeak as she tripped down the flight of stairs and ended up tangled in a knot of legs and wings. Pinkie's eyelid twitched. Thunderlane walked up with a wide grin. Hey, heard you needed a weather pony.
Yeah, you know any?
Yeah, me.
Move those clouds just a bit to the west, would you please?
Sure thing, Sugar Mane. The Pegasus took to the sky, easily moving the cloud bank over. Was that all you needed?
Yepperoni. Thanks, Thunderlane. You're a lifesaver.
All in a day's work. Yep. Noble Stallion, helping out the mares. That's me. Thunderlane landed, nodding to himself. Now, any pony else need help around here? Blossomforth scabbled in the dirt.
Well, actually, I hear Twilight's doing some paperwork that she needs help with, Pinkie offered.
I think I'll help Blossomforth. The stallion turned to the grateful mare. Now, let's see if I just kind of pull like this. While his efforts did manage to set Blossomforth free, Thunderlane had forgotten about the basic laws of physics. Thus, he stumbled backwards, knocking into the buffet table and triggering a chain reaction which ended with all the food on the floor. Pinkie Pie stared. Thunderlane at least had the decency to look embarrassed.
Okay.
Pinkie glanced up at the sky.
Fluttershy, your job's changed. I need you to keep the guests away until I picked up some new treats.
End scene. All right, next. Lavender Unicorn Syndrome by Sharaloth. Rarity awoke feeling well-rested and wonderfully normal. She stretched out, pulling off her sleeping mask and looking out at the bright dawning day with eyes that did not hurt. She hopped off her bed and into her slippers, her magic grabbing a robe from her closet. She felt so good she barely noticed Opal's usual morning demands. She was halfway to the door before she noticed that something was wrong. She was halfway to the bathroom before she realized that this something wrong was something Lavender. It wasn't until she looked into the mirror that she realized the Lavender wrongness was herself. The Lavender Unicorn looked into the mirror and Twilight Sparkle stared back.
Oh, come on!
She shouted at her reflection.
How is this even a thing that happens?
A frantic pounding on the front door of the boutique tore her attention away from the mirror.
We're closed!
She screamed down the hall, hoping that whoever the early bird was would stop bashing her door down long enough to hear her.
Rarity!
Sweetie Belle's voice floated in from the guest room.
I don't feel so good.
The Lavender Unicorn snarled in frustration. She would much rather be having a panic attack and dramatically fainting right now, but her sister took priority.
A moment, sweetie,
she called. She looked into the mirror again.
Okay, Rarity. This is just another day in your wonderful, bizarre life. You are a lady, and a lady does not allow such little stumbling blocks to prevent her from being as elegant and wonderful as befits a mare of your refinement. Now get in there and comfort your sister. But my mane,
the Lavender Unicorn in the mirror replied.
I know what it is,
the Lavender Unicorn snapped, stomping a hoof.
Now you listen, and you listen good. It doesn't matter what's happened to your mane, or your coat, or your eyes, or anything. You are going to be the big sister you promised you'd be, or so help me. I will eat every tub of ice cream I own, and then go out and buy some more. Oh, you wouldn't. My flakes will get fat. Now are you going to behave, or do I have to get my spoon? No, I'll do it. I'll do it.
The Lavender Unicorn capitulated with a tearful collapse against the sink.
But can I at least give it a brush first? No!
The Lavender Unicorn sighed and pulled herself from the mirror, walking the short distance to the guest room and gently nudging the door open. The pounding downstairs had only gotten more insistent, but she ignored it in favor of tending to her family. Sweetie Belle lay on the bed, a pillow over her head and the covers wrapped tightly around her.
Rarity? Is that you? It's me, sweetie,
the Lavender Unicorn replied.
Are you all right? It hurts, Rarity,
Sweetie said.
Every time I open my eyes, it's just too bright.
The Lavender Unicorn looked to the tightly drawn curtains that threw the room into deep shadows.
Yes, well, I suppose that will happen. Here, dear, let me fetch something for you.
She trotted to her room and grabbed one of her better sleeping masks. She returned quickly, still ignoring the customer who wouldn't quit, and sat by her sister.
I've got something to block out the light, but I'm going to have to move the pillow to put it on you. Is that all right?
Sweetie Belle shuddered but nodded.
Then on 3. 1, 2, 3.
The Lavender Unicorn pulled the pillow away and floated the sleeping mask onto the face of her sister. She had to tie it tightly, but it stayed, and Sweetie Belle let out a sigh of relief. The Lavender Unicorn stared at her sister with sudden fear. Sweetie's horn had turned lavender, and the color had spread like tendrils down her face and along her coat.
I don't like being sick, Rarity,
Sweetie Belle said, pathetic and miserable and heartbreaking.
Neither do I, dear,
the Lavender Unicorn said, brushing her sister's mane.
But it'll be okay. This will all be okay. You promise? Pinky promise,
the Lavender Unicorn assured her. She nuzzled her sister, gently slipping the pillow under her head. She turned towards the hallway. The pounding at the door had only gotten more insistent, and now the Lavender Unicorn could make out some pony calling her name.
Will you be all right? I've got a very rude customer that I have to make go away. I'll be okay,
Sweetie said, snuggling deeper into her blankets.
It doesn't hurt so much anymore, and you pinky promised, so I know it'll be okay. Yes, it will,
the Lavender Unicorn said, then rose and left the room, softly closing the door behind her. The moment she was out of earshot of her sister, she broke into a gallop. She stormed down the stairs and to her front door, where the knocking continued unabated.
Knock it off!
The Lavender Unicorn roared, unlatching the door with her magic and slamming it open.
Just who do you think you are?
She stopped mid-tirade, staring at the pony in front of her. End scene! Oh, the suspense. Anyway, next. Sparkle's Law by AestheticB. Twilight gently opened the door to Sugar Cube Corner and trotted slowly into the bakery, grateful to be out of the harsh, cruel sunlight that had not only forced her to get out of bed, but was also worsening her headache. She wondered briefly if writing to Celestia and asking for a couple hours of impromptu night was in the cards.
Oh, dearie, Twilight!
Mrs. Cake greeted her, coming down the stairs that Twilight presumed led up to her room.
Oh, you look positively ragged, dearie! And how did you manage to get in?
She asked slowly.
The door was locked.
Not important, Twilight declared. What's important is that you have... She paused for a moment, savoring the beautiful word that was about to pass through her lips.
Coffee.
She drew the 2 syllables out and allowed a look of bliss to pass over her face.
A
look of hesitation passed over Mrs. Cake's face, and Twilight felt the coffeeless terror grip her once again. What if Mrs. Cake didn't have any coffee? What if the mayor back in town hall had lied to her? What if this was all an elaborate ruse to get her out of the way and set the stage for Nightmare Moon's return? She imagined Nightmare Moon rising to power and plunging the world into an eternity without daylight or coffee. She imagined herself enslaved by the evil princess who would taunt her with herbal tea and Coca-Cola Zero while she begged for the sweet release of death.
I was just preparing for the arrival of the carrots. They'll be using the bakery today, you see, but I suppose I could fix you a cup.
Relief flooded through Twilight at the words, and Mrs. Cake flashed her a small smile.
You sure looks like you need it. Just wait right here, hun.
Before Mrs. Cake could leave, Twilight grabbed her and pulled their faces closer together. She looked Mrs. Cake directly in the eyes before speaking.
Thank you, Mrs. Cake. Thank you.
Mrs. Cake backed into the kitchen without ever taking her eyes off Twilight.
Yes, she said. You're welcome.
Twilight took a seat in an empty booth and rubbed at her temples with her hooves. Everything was going to work out okay. Nothing was going to go wrong.
And watch out for Pinkie Pie when you're around town, Mrs. Cake called out from the kitchen. She's acting a little more odd than usual today. Hopefully she won't get into any trouble.
Has she done this before?
Oh, goodness, yes, was Mrs. Cake's emphatic reply. Last time my good spatula went missing, and she spent 2 weeks' worth of pay on a coat and hat, and then went missing for 2 days. We eventually found her in the basement interrogating a customer.
Twilight groaned. Pinkie would be one more thing to worry about, but only after she got her coffee.
Cream and sugar, dearie?
No cream. Pinkie Pie amount of sugar.
So, Mrs. Cake began as she set the steaming mug in front of Twilight. How are the preparations for the celebration going?
She sat across from the unicorn and offered her a biscuit. Twilight was about to cool the coffee with a spell, but decided that using magic in her current mental state was probably a bad idea.
Oh, horribly,
she said cheerfully as she blew on her coffee.
Oh, well,
Fluttershy is missing, and Pinkie Pie is doing whatever it is she does trying to find her. Twilight was surprised at how happy she sounded saying these words.
Rainbow Dash is going to try to tame Fluttershy's birds, which will probably end in disaster. Well, if there's anything I could do to help.
Oh, you've helped me enough already, Mrs. Cake. Believe me. Anyway, Applejack and Rarity are still doing their parts perfectly, I'm sure. Fluttershy will turn up and everything will be just fine. Normally, Twilight would be pulling her hair out, worried that the day would end in disaster. But the acquisition of coffee had her in a wonderful mood. Nothing was going to go wrong. She took a sip. Her smile immediately fell away and her eyes narrowed.
What is this?
She asked Mrs. Cake in a low, dangerous voice.
What do you mean, dearie?
Twilight felt one of her lower eyelids twitch as several parts of her mane sprung out of place once more.
This isn't coffee, she accused. This is something else! Something wrong!
Mrs. Cake began to edge away from Twilight, looking genuinely afraid.
Sorry, I guess I should have asked if decaf was okay. Decaf? Ah!
The mug shattered, spilling the blasphemous fluid all over the table.
Of course it isn't okay! You think I abandoned my duties and broke into your house for a cup of decaffeinated coffee?
Mrs. Cake backed halfway to the back of the room.
You think we keep real coffee in a house with Pinkie Pie?
The increasing volume of their conversation was causing Twilight's headache to worsen. She groaned and clutched at her skull with a foreleg.
Of course you don't, she said, her voice returning to indoor volume.
That would be madness. She stood.
Maybe, Mrs. Cake said apprehensively, maybe you should try to function without the coffee, dearie. It seems to be taking its toll on you.
Twilight looked at her as if she had suggested sawing off her own horn. Yeah, she said slowly, I'm just gonna go now.
Okay, well, have fun?
Was all Mrs. Cake could manage as Twilight left the building. With the door to Sugar Cube Corner closed behind her and the sunlight doing its best to cause her brain to explode, Twilight thought about her options. Clearly, acquiring coffee was her #1 priority. She set off towards the Carousel Boutique, hoping that Spike had made better progress than she.
Sugar Cube Corner, she muttered as she went. More like Sugar Cube Lies! Decaf. Thinking I could leave.
End scene! Up next, The First Light of Dawn by Colden Gardez. Trixie was about to head out the door to find a gullible unicorn stallion when Luna arrived. There was no grand entrance, no fanfare announcing her royal presence. One moment Trixie was reaching for the doorknob with her mouth, and in the next, the temperature of the room dropped about 50 degrees. She paused at the sudden chill, her breath coating the metal knob with beads of condensation that quickly frosted into tiny dots of ice. The gas lamps flickered uncertainly, and for an instant the room was plunged into a hesitant darkness that only reluctantly receded from the glow of the lights. Trixie froze in place, her muscles seizing in panic. She stared stupidly at the door for several long seconds, too terrified to turn and confirm what she already knew to be true. Her hasty, ill-conceived plans to find a unicorn and ditch the torque died without a whimper.
Luna,
she started to say. Her parched mouth stuck on the syllables, and she swallowed several times before continuing.
I'm glad you found me. I was just about to...
She trailed off again as she turned and beheld the nightmare behind her. The princess was immense. She filled the room with darkness. Her umbra blotted out the light as the moon eclipsed the sun. Her horn, a wicked and shining spire, grazed the high ceiling where she stood. Her head and neck tilted imperiously. A bruised black cloud that sparked with a million stars flowed from her mane and tail, the only scrap of motion in the room. Only her eyes, bright and shining with barely contained fury, offered a hint that the princess was anything more than a statue. All of Trixie's arguments fled. Her pleas, about to roll from her tongue, dried up as she drank in the sight before her. Nothing that cared for her excuses shared the small room. "So it's true," Luna whispered, her words cold and distant as the moon echoed in Trixie's mind. She unconsciously pulled her shawl tighter around her chest. The bulky metal shape of the torque showed through it like a poorly concealed pregnancy. Her mind raced as she sought an excuse, any excuse, and she forced her best smile onto her face.
I've been looking for you ever since the celebration, she said. I knew you'd be able to find—
Be silent, Luna interrupted. Even now, at the very end, you lie to me? Was it ever only lies? The alicorn's horn flared, casting deeper shadows across the room. The shawl wrapped around Trixie's chest disintegrated in a cloud of glittering dust. The traitorous torque, revealed, gleamed like a jewel in Luna's presence. You fool, she continued. You dare steal from a princess and flaunt your theft openly? You dare wear that which was made for a god? It was an accident, Trixie blurted. Her words tumbled out of control.
I didn't know. Please, Luna, I didn't—
Silence! Luna thundered. The room quaked in sympathy as she spoke. You have no idea the pain and devastation you caused. Celestia banished me for 1,000 years for less than what you have done. I had to, Trixie quailed. She backed as far away from Luna as possible until her rump pressed against the frosted door.
You said it was the most powerful lens you've ever seen. I needed it to get—
Enough! Luna roared. She moved. In the blink of an eye, she was only inches away from Trixie, her horn lowered like a spear. Remove it now, and I'll ask Celestia to be merciful for the sake of our former friendship. The first tear of the evening ran down Trixie's face. I can't! Her voice shook with terror.
Please, believe me, Luna. I can't. By the stars, I wish I could, but I can't. Nothing I've done even budges it.
Luna snarled. Then perhaps you aren't trying hard enough. Her horn flared again, and a dark light surrounded the torque. Trixie's world vanished in a flood of pain. A sensation like 1,000 knives sliding beneath her skin and forced anything resembling real thought out of her head. A ragged scream tore from her throat as the agony doubled and redoubled. A terrible tearing sensation split her down the middle. When her eyes opened, she was lying on the floor at Luna's feet. A fan of blood, slowly crystallizing in the cold air, stained the varnished wood floor beneath her. The vile torque still clung to her, the jewel in its center sparkling brighter than she remembered. Please, she whispered. A thin tendril of drool escaped her quivering lips. It hurts. Oh, it hurts, Luna said with sudden softness. At last, the great and powerful Trixie hurts. To think, I was worried about the hundreds of thousands of ponies your carelessness and avarice have hurt or made homeless. But now I see how little that matters. All that matters to you is your own pain, your own suffering. The alicorn's horn sparkled again, and a scintillating light danced across the torque, followed almost instantly by a blinding flash. When Trixie's vision returned, she was lying several feet farther away in the center of a ring of ash. The floor around her smoked. Luna narrowed her eyes. "Your thoughtlessness has destroyed 2 cities so far," she continued. "And who knows how many more if I don't stop this madness. It's either me or her, Trixie, and she'll pursue you to the ends of the earth. Now give me the torque." Despair gripped her. Her pain faded with the realization that she would not be leaving the room alive. "I didn't mean for this to happen! By Celestia, I didn't mean
Don't say that name!
Luna screamed. "My sister was the kindest, wisest pony to ever exist, and you turned her into a monster! History will forget you and remember her as a raving beast! How is that fair? How is that fair?" An invisible claw latched onto Trixie's hind leg, raising her off the ground to dangle like a fish from a line. The world spun around her as the magic dragged her through the air and then slammed her through the wall with the force of a runaway train. The thin wood-reinforced plaster shattered, and she crashed through the new hole into the next room. She tumbled across the floor like a fool's rag doll, only stopping when a solid wood credenza blocked her path. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was or why her body hurt so much. Luna's frame appeared in the hole. The ragged edges of the broken wall melted as she approached, the pitiful matter dissolving in the face of her terrible will. She stepped into the room with Trixie, and the terrible cold followed her. "I had a dream," the princess whispered. She drew closer to the unicorn, who only now began to whimper and stir again. "I had a sister. I had a home. I thought I had a friend." Her silver-shod hoof crunched the flinders of the wood beside Trixie's head as it descended. No mere sword ever promised so much danger as it. "But you stole all those things from me," she continued, her head lowered until her snout brushed against the weeping unicorn's mane. "You took what I offered and you spat on it. I trusted you. Celestia helped me. I trusted you." She raised her head back up, gazing at the ceiling as though seeing it through to the moon high above. A single tear, bright as a diamond against her midnight coat, trickled down her jaw, through the air to land before Trixie. "I am responsible for all of this," she said to the ceiling. The anger was gone from her voice, replaced by a sad resignation. "I told you about the torque. I set you on this path. And because of my mistake, thousands are suffering again." "Please, Luna." "Last time, I was too weak. I gave in to my petty jealousy, and the world suffered for it. I will not make that mistake again." She looked down at Trixie's prostrate form and raised her hoof. "I'm sorry, Trixie." Her hoof came down with impossible speed. It slammed into the amethyst jewel held in the center of the torque, and the room filled with the sun. End scene. That's all, folks. Thanks for tuning in.